India is the only major economy whose energy transition is consonant with a sub-2-degree rise in global temperature. We achieved our NDCs 9 years in advance. We had said that we'll have 40% of our capacity coming from non-fossils by 2030. We achieved that in 2021, November.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Arrah Sorkin of the New York Times and CNBC, and it's a privilege to be with all of you, especially to have the following discussion about really what is, you've probably heard the phrase now, polycrisis here in Davos. And there are three words on the screen, the interplay of food, energy, and water. And those are, in their own ways, the crisis that we're going to be talking about this afternoon. But hopefully we're not just going to talk about what is the problem. We're going to try to get to some of the solutions and also debate some of the challenges ahead. Let me just tell you, we have such a great group of people to have this conversation with us. Your Excellency, Tran is here. He is the Deputy Prime Minister of Vietnam, and he's been doing some remarkable things in terms of the public-private sector on this very topic. And Beathe, Tvinnereim is the Minister of International Development of Norway. We're going to have a discussion with her about some of the remarkable things that they've been thinking about in terms of agriculture. Ramon Laguarta is here. He's the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of PepsiCo, of course, one of the largest consumer packaged goods companies and food companies in the world, and playing a major role in this topic. And then Raj Kumar Singh is the Minister of Power and Ministry of New and Renewable Energy of India. The climate and energy play a huge role in this discussion about food. And then finally, Idris Elba is here. He's an actor, of course, but he is the Goodwill Ambassador to the International Fund for Agriculture Development, and he just won the Crystal Award. You've seen him in all sorts of films and other things, as you very well know. Luther, and I don't need to even go on. Mandela. I mean, we can do the whole list. He's Stringer Bell to me. I told him this earlier. I should also tell you he's a DJ. Just won the Crystal Award with his wife. They have a podcast together, which you should check out. And oddly enough, maybe not oddly enough, I want to start the conversation with you. Raj, I want to go to you, talk about energy. Talk about the cost of energy. Talk about the economics of energy. And everything's a trade-off. And I was going to talk about the moral trade-offs that are involved in this. And maybe people say that you can't have a trade-off when it comes to morality. We can debate that too. But the reason I raise this is right now India continues to import and buy lots of oil, as you know, from Russia, amidst this war. Lots of people look at that and say, why are you doing that? We don't like you doing that. But it has to do with the economics of this. So please, yes, please answer.
Yeah. Now, this is an aside, by the way. It's not germane to the question. But the quantum of, oil and, not oil, the quantum of gas, etc., we import from Russia in a month is something which all Europe combined consumes in a day from Russia. So the quantum is that. But basically, if you are talking fossil, non-fossil, then India is the only major economy whose energy transition is consonant with a sub-2-degree rise in global temperature. We achieved our NDCs 9 years in advance. We had said that we'll have 40% of our capacity coming from non-fossils by 2030. We achieved that in 2021, November. And therefore, in Glasgow, we upped our ambition and we said that in 2030, we'll have 50% of our capacity come from non-fossils, up from 40 to 50. And I shall cross that because I'm already at 264,000. If you take the renewable energy capacity which I have established and which is under installation, it is 264 gigawatts out of 408 gigawatts. And so 500 I'll reach. In emissions intensity reduction also, I'm a leader. Because I had pledged that by 2030, I'll reduce my emissions intensity by 33%, even though India's emissions intensity is 1/3 of the world average. 1/3 of the world average.
The Russian oil
and I just finished, 1 minute. And we've already reduced our emissions intensity by 30%. Now, recently, Climate Action, they came out with a ranking of countries. in the top 5 countries, India figures as a country, whose climate action is, the best in the world. And we are the largest economy in that. The other 4 are small economies. We are the largest major economy in that.
Right.
So as far as energy transition is concerned, we are a leader, will continue to be a leader. Green hydrogen, green ammonia. Right now, I have factories under construction for manufacturing 32 million tons of green ammonia. So that's energy transition. But let me tell you about the topic which we are discussing here today. Now, yeah.
Well, let me ask you one follow-up. If the energy,
we have done something. And what we have done in food, energy, and water, what we have done and what we are doing is something which can be an example. For example, we decided that we'll green our agriculture, right? So we came out with a program for solarizing the groundwater irrigation systems. And we set out with a target of 3.5 million pumps, which we shall solarize. Now we had to, we've got a demand for solarizing 5.3 million pumps. We are solarizing that. We started a new system of having separate agriculture feeders, and we are solarizing those feeders, right? And then we are also sort of encouraging farmers to set up solar panels on their land, which that they can use for other things.
So let me just ask you this then. If the Russian import of oil is such a small part of what's needed in terms of energy in your country, why wouldn't you decide not to import the oil at all from them?
Beg pardon?
Well, if the Russian oil is such a small part of what's needed in India, why wouldn't you say, you know what, we don't need to import it then?
Basically, if you don't import your requirement, what will happen is that your prices will go up 3 or 4 times. Now, my demand.
So it's significant then?
No, just hold on. Yeah, even the small margin is significant. I'll just tell you what's happened. In India, the energy demand increased by 10.6% this year. Last year, it increased by 8%. Despite that, we have not had any blackouts. My energy cost, by cost of power, remains what it was, level. So such a large economy, no increase in prices at all of energy, I'm happy. And my economy is growing at 6.5%, 7%. My demand is growing at 10.5%. We are the fastest growing large economy in the world.
I don't want to belabor the point. The reason I'm raising the issue is because I think food, energy, and water, for a lot of people, and I imagine one of the reasons you guys want to talk about this is it's a moral issue for people. And I think people look at the war between Russia and Ukraine as a moral one. And given your support by buying oil from Russia, it appears as if you are supporting them.
We have been buying oil from Russia for a long time. Now, you say that, the war in Ukraine is something which should result in people sort of cutting off oil supplies. That's your perspective. That's your perspective.
There's obviously a lot of multinational companies and countries that have done that.
We have a conflict with our northern neighbor. Did you do that? No. You continued buying from our northern neighbor. We had a conflict with our northern neighbor, right on my border. And it is an expansionist neighbor. Did you do anything? No. That's the point. So basically, again, coming back to the topic, you have been talking about energy transition. Now suddenly you had this disruption. So now you don't talk about energy transition, you talk about energy security. Now let me tell you one thing. Coming back to this topic, if you talk to the farmers in Africa and you talk to them about energy transition, it means nothing. Why? Because 600 million people in Africa don't have access to energy. The farmers in Africa don't have access to energy. How do they irrigate their fields? Nobody is bothered. We are. What we did was, under the International Solar Alliance, we started a program for bringing solar irrigation to the farmers in Africa. Now, no company was willing to go to invest. Why? Because of the risk perceptions. So under the International Solar Alliance, we launched a fund for de-risking it and getting investment there. And up till now, I haven't had many contributions for that fund from developed countries. If you are worried, then do something about it.
Right.
Right?
Ramon?
No, yes. To to the topic again, that we're talking too much about energy, not enough about food. Maybe we can.
Well,
because I think there is a powerful, very powerful concept of how do we create a movement towards transforming agriculture to regenerative agriculture, and I think it's a very powerful concept. And maybe we don't talk enough about it, and it helps with a lot of things. Livelihood of farmers, it helps with CO2 reduction, it helps with, making the soil, live for many years. It has so many powerful things. It will improve the yields, so it will solve for hunger and many other things. So I think we need probably worth talking about how do we make it happen.
Well, but that's what I want to ask you. I want to ask you about the marketplace, the market for this, because part of what within the sort of capitalistic system that exists so far is product that is priced, sort of premium priced product, frankly, probably for the crowd that hangs out at the World Economic Forum, who appreciates the way certain things are farmed. They may buy meatless products instead of meat, and they're willing to pay that premium, right? And there's a market that's being developed for that. The question is, how big is that market ultimately? Well, can the price come down with scale to a place where actually it's meaningful? And this goes back, this is sort of the energy food question, who pays for the transition?
Yeah, I think there could be a misperception there. I tell you, for example, one of our biggest brands, Lay's, we have the solutions, and we're actually making it happen, where a Lay's that is grown on a sustainable farm that has almost zero emissions in the factories, because we've changed to renewable energy, that is transported by electric vehicles to the consumer, that has the lowest sodium levels of any other potato in the market, is not more expensive than some of the other potatoes in the market. So we can transform end-to-end a particular supply chain without really incurring in meaningful cost.
But that doesn't seem to be the case across the board for lots of
different
food products.
But there is a cost in some elements of that supply chain. Now, how companies manage the end-to-end process. So maybe my transportation is more expensive, but maybe I can save money by not using water in the factories, or by moving to renewable energies, which are cheaper. So there is ways for us to manage the P&L, the overall cost of a product, and give the consumer a much more sustainable product. Now, the challenge for us as brand owners is how do we educate consumers to understand sustainability and make choices? So how do we drive demand towards the brands and the products that are, have a catalytic impact across the whole supply chain? And how do we help those consumers understand? There is a lot of discussion about environmental labeling, some simple ways to tell consumers this is a more sustainable product than others. Once we do that, we're going to create such a massive
But I think there's a fairness to say that look, this is like EVs, electric vehicles, right? For the last 10 years, EVs, for the most part, have cost more than cars that are powered by fossil fuels. And eventually, we will get there, but there's sort of a leading edge group.
There is.
And that's, I imagine, likely with food. And the question is, can you build that market? And by the way, even with EVs, unfortunately, I could argue we're not there yet.
And I think, again, there is, the World Economic Forum has been very good at creating the Alliance for Early Mover Alliance for adopters of new technology and new products. And I think large companies and medium-sized companies, but mostly large companies, we have to carry the cost of enabling the scaling of new technologies and new products. And that cost is relevant, but it's not relevant in, like, we're a $90 billion company, right? So we can make a lot of trade-offs. We have this responsibility. But I would like, since there are 3 members of government here, I'd like
Anne had her hand up.
This is an ecosystem solution, right?
That trade-off that he's talking about, Ramon's talking about, of a big corporation like that, as it relates to smallholder farmers, private sector needs to be incentivized in that middle ground, that early, how you phrased it, early
adopters.
Early adopters.
Right.
There needs to be some real dialogue towards the private sector to adopt that, and the bigger companies need to help society.
We are not getting to the point. We are not getting to the point. The point is if we are serious about it, let's get to the point. The point is, how do you get investment to get irrigation for the poorer farmers in Africa? I mean, we can afford it to solarize our agriculture, but how do you do that for the poorer farmers in Africa? Let's talk about that. So you'll have to de-risk it. Now, that is absolutely essential. Now, the water is the first priority for agriculture. Then fertilizer is another priority. Yeah. Now, fertilizer is again something which is fossil fuel based right now, but you can make it green.
Right.
And for fertilizer, I mean, in India we are doing it. We are testing, and then we are applying fertilizers, and then we are going to green the ammonia. I mean, we are replacing gray ammonia with green ammonia for fertilizers. Now, this can also be carried through Africa. Now, that is what you see, basically you have to divide it in two parts. And let's not digress, let's talk about the topic. One is the marginal farmer. His problems are different. The other is the richer farmer. Now, his problems are much less. We talk about the marginal farmer, he is on a subsistence farmer. So get water to him at least cost. How do you do that? I believe renewables is an answer. And fertilizer, how do you reduce the price of fertilizer? You reduce the price of green ammonia, reduce the price of ammonia. Right now, gray ammonia costs $1,100 a ton. If I make green ammonia, I think my estimate is it will cost $600 a ton. So that's what I plan to do in my country. Right. And I think that needs to be extended to Africa if we are serious about it. And incidentally, again, I can stop imports of Russian oil. Let European countries do that first. I import 1/10 of what Europe imports from Russia, by the way. So have that stopped first, and then you tell me I'll stop it.
And then I want to go to Your Excellency. Maybe you can respond to both of those issues.
That's why, do that. And I'll say, I'm a member of the government, I'll do that.
Anne's going to reply, and then I want to bring Your Excellency into this.
I beg to differ, sir. But the fact is that we have all these instruments, and you're quite right. We need to invest in renewable energy in Africa, but we have the instruments.
But you just need to de-risk it.
Sure, we have de-risking mechanisms. They're all there, and we are investing in them.
But they have to be deployed in Africa.
And we are, and in India, actually. And just last year, Norway launched a new climate investment fund, which just actually last year invested in a huge solar
So let's have a discussion with the International Solar Alliance.
But the thing is that you need to include also small-scale farmers on that. I don't believe in that division between industrial farmer and small-scale farming in Africa, because if the solution is to get those small-scale farmers on board and get them linked to the value chains and have decentralized, like what you were talking about, get those products into industrialization and connecting them to the value chain.
They won't be able to afford the inputs if the inputs are expensive. That is the problem. You see, I can afford, if I am a large farmer, I can afford to pay more for water. Now the marginal farmer cannot. We have to bring down the cost of water for the marginal farmer. I have to bring down the cost of fertilizer for the marginal farmer. I mean, he just can't afford the cost of fertilizer, which prevails today.
Yeah, but there are multiple problems to solve, right? The marginal farmer might need some intervention, but I think the transformation of
and most of the farmers in Africa
in Norway, in the US, in South Africa, in Brazil, in Vietnam, this is also necessary. We don't need to only try to solve for that marginal farmer. I think it's a holistic transformation of food and agriculture.
Somebody who owns 500 acres and is farming on 500 acres, he will buy the inputs. I mean, he doesn't need your assistance.
Not necessarily. I mean, there's a lot of people in between, right? So I was just in Vietnam, in Hai Lai, and we were doing a lot of potato farming there, and we're increasing the yields of these 2 hectares. 2 hectares.
And that's,
we can bring them the technology.
1 hectare,
we can bring them, the practices. We can incentivize them with higher prices. We don't need to. Sometimes we create a bigger problem than it is.
The large farmer will make more profit supplying to Pepsi. But the small farmer,
we're talking about the transition here, right?
And 2 hectare farmer is not a large farmer.
The small farmer has to sell. The small farmer has to sell his produce in the local market.
Your Excellency has been very patient, and I know you want to get in. The gloves have come off on a conversation I did not imagine they would. Please.
Thưa các đồng nghiệp của tôi, thời gian là rất ít. Đừng tranh cãi những cái điều gì mà chúng ta đã thấy rằng đấy là xu thế thế giới. Đây là những quyết định có tính pháp lý rồi. Chuyển đổi năng lượng đó là một điều mà chúng ta đã thỏa thuận. toàn cầu. Và đó là một xu thế không thể khác được, nên không phải bàn chuyện đấy. Tôi muốn bàn là làm cái gì cho nông nghiệp bền vững, làm cái gì cho nông nghiệp thích ứng, làm cái gì cho nông nghiệp đóng góp vào để giảm cái nhu cầu năng lượng hiện nay đang chiếm 30%. Làm thế nào là nông nghiệp có thể thay thế cái nguồn năng lượng sinh khối thân thiện với môi trường. Thì tôi nghĩ đấy là về vấn đề chúng ta bàn. Và chúng ta sẽ bàn làm nào cho nông nghiệp sử dụng tiết kiệm nước, để làm sao mà giữa thủy điện và nông nghiệp nó có thể hài hòa với nhau. Thì tôi nghĩ là các ngày có lẽ là chúng ta nên thỏa thuận với nhau rằng là chuyển đổi lương thực, nông nghiệp, chuyển đổi về năng lượng và quản lý nước tổng hợp, chia sẻ. Đó là điều mà chúng ta phải bàn chứ. Xin cảm ơn các vị.
Thank you for bringing the conversation back.
Really? Really?
We need some.
But
with that-
let me then ask the question that he just, or re-ask the question that he just asked, which is, okay, we've got about 5 minutes. Let's talk solutions in a real way, which is if you're gonna land the plane on these three issues, the interplay of food, energy, and specifically water, and the price of all these things, and part of the debate is real that you guys just had. But what do you do? What do you do?
What do I do? Start with-
First of all, you begin by having a concern for the poorer, for the small farmer. That's the first thing. And if you have a concern, then follow it up with money. That means de-risk it, investment will go. The small farmer needs irrigation at less price. The small farmer needs fertilizers at less cost. The small farmer needs a secure market.
Anne?
Yeah, no, we agree. I don't think we disagree on that. The fact is that de-risking should be an essential element in policies like mine as Minister of International Development. And we know that it works. We get the technologies out there with quite small money. I was in...
But how much of that is a subsidy, right? I mean, how much of that is government subsidy that we're now talking about? How much of that is
Well, it depends
NGOs and charity, effectively, that's sort of supporting this? And how much of it is the private sector? And is there a market-based solution that actually does it on its own? Is it?
It's, you know, if I can use aid money, taxpayers' money from Norway to unleash private money, that is a great investment. And just the climate investment fund that I mentioned, €1 unleashes 9 private euros.
Right.
I mean, that's a great investment. We do the same in de-risking mechanism in the World Bank called MIGA, which is targeting the most vulnerable conflict-prone countries like Somalia. I was in Somalia just a few weeks ago and saw an investment where, you know, quite small aid money can unleash the potential of private investment. And that, I think, is the way ahead for the agricultural sector.
Jump in. This is like the Suicide Squad, sort of.
But I think it's a combination of a few things, you know, and one of them which we haven't really talked about is the youth, right? The marketplace is in the youth, you know, as someone that's young now is part of the adult system tomorrow, and they bring with that a want to work, a want to eat. There is an ecosystem attached to that. And I think we also have to think about, you know, implementing systems that have worked already. So, yes, private investors want to get involved. They do. How do we incentivize them? You know, we see it in different sectors. You know, we see multi-ecosystems around different sectors. In my film industry, there's multi-ecosystems. In farming, it's not just the farming. There is all the engines and all the ancillaries around it that need promotion, need incentivizing, need government's assistance, need promoting, which is where I come in.
I would make every country in the world accountable to make a food transition program to sustainable agriculture. I mean, I think this is every country.
Is this the equivalent of like a net zero style program?
This is elevating.
How would you do that?
Yeah, this is elevating the food to the top, changing the food system to the top of the priorities in every country around the world, putting the farmer at the center, making sure the farmer makes good money, making sure the farmer helps us to decarbonize the economy, making sure the farmer uses less resources, less fertilizers, less water, incentivizing, and then making private-public interventions, which we are, but a much more intentional, committed focus. I think this is a priority, an urgency. I would say we need to talk
and
about
speak that.
food.
Can I just ask one question on top of it, though? Which is, why do you think, so we talk about the climate all the time. It has been elevated as a central issue of our time. Oddly enough, I would argue food has not. And food is such an immediate, right in front of you issue. And I wonder why you think that is, meaning why you think it is that it has not been. He talked about it, putting it at the top of everything, effectively. Why do you think it hasn't been?
Because you can go into a supermarket and buy your food right now.
Yeah.
And that's not the case for most of the world.
Yeah.
Most of the world can't do that.
Yeah.
And until everyone is starving, then it will become a topic. Trust me. It happened in the pandemic. You saw people in LA, in food lines, couldn't get food. And suddenly the media are talking about food crisis.
Yeah.
That's partly why.
Because these people are growing their own food, and for some of us, that's hard to imagine, but that's where food comes from.
Right.
Surprise. Well, one thing is the emission side of the climate issue and food. The other side is climate adaptation, and just because that's where we need to invest as well, especially when we talk about developing countries. Because
And what do you mean by that?
no, we need to give these small-scale farmers the techniques, the technologies, the agronomy to be able to adapt to a changing climate, because this is an issue. I mean, these farmers don't have insurance. When the rain doesn't come, or when the rain comes too hard, they lose everything.
Yeah.
But again, we have the techniques, we have the solution, we know what to do, but it takes investments. And if we can, make sure that these small-scale farmers become part of a value chain and become businessmen and women, we can create those good circles that will make it possible for them to invest in that technology, which is available, and produce a surplus along the value chain and create jobs for those generations of youth, especially in Africa, that will need. We will need a lot of jobs in the value chains of the agricultural.
One-line answer to your question is this, that the people who set the agenda today in the world are not hungry. They have never had to go without food. So food is not on the agenda. That's the problem.
Idris, last word to you.
I think it's a policy level thing. We have to make it policy. We have to, if we're going to all be governed by a small sector of people, then they have to make food a policy.
Yes.
We're going to run out of time, Your Excellency.
Yeah.
The final word to you, sir.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Theo tôi thì 3 vấn đề hôm nay không thể ai nói là đấy là những vấn đề không có tính toàn cầu. Vấn đề lương thực chắc chắn là một vấn đề toàn cầu. Chúng ta không thể sống trong một xã hội với một cái đạo đức mà nhìn những người khác mà đang bị chết vì đói, thiếu lương thực. Và chúng ta cũng không thể đứng nhìn 2 tỷ người hiện nay đang thiếu nước, và tương lai chắc chắn sẽ là không có nước. Bởi vì, và chúng ta biết rằng là biến đổi khí hậu thì như các quý vị biết, nó là một bài toán đã nhìn thấy, dự báo được. Và nếu nói để biến đổi khí hậu như thế này thì kể cả lương thực, kể cả tài nguyên nước và kể cả cái xã hội là người chúng ta cũng khó có thể tồn tại. Tức là vấn đề sống còn. Bởi vậy nên chúng ta nên nhìn ở đây một cái góc độ các cái mối quan hệ tương tác, cộng hưởng và xung đột để giải quyết cả 3 vấn đề này, và thêm vấn đề biến đổi khí hậu nữa. Tôi cho rằng là vấn đề hoàn toàn toàn cầu và những vấn đề cấp bách hiện nay, chứ không phải là vấn đề cấp bách. Thì tôi muốn nói như vậy, để chúng ta nhìn, để tìm trong một cái thế giới mà chúng ta có thể hợp tác, chúng ta có thể giải quyết mọi vấn đề trên cơ sở khoa học, để tất cả các mục tiêu, tất cả mọi người đều đạt được. Thì đấy mới là vấn đề chúng ta cần phải bàn. Xin.
It's a beautiful way to end the conversation. I want to thank all of our panelists for a tremendous discussion at an important time.